Welcome to Ministers Talking a weekly program where Rev BRZ and Rev Z and their guests chat about current affairs, world events, spiritual principles, and any old they want to talk about. Based on the new thought philosophy and ancient wisdoms, Ministers Talking shares a visionary perspective of the evolving spiral called spiritual living. Join us each week as we explore the emerging paradigm of life on planet Earth and beyond.
And good morning, dear ones. Reverend Robert with you over here.
Rev Z right here.
And we're a couple of ministers talking shit. And this happens every Friday morning here on the New Thought Media Network, 7 a.m. Mountain Time. So grateful that you are with us. Good morning, Z. How are things on your side of town?
Everything is good. Last snow came through here yesterday. A little bit still on the ground. And
we're affirming last snow.
Yeah, you know, they say we're supposed to get some more on Wednesday, and as spring officially starts on Sunday. So I don't know. I'm just taking it one day at a time, I guess.
Could say springtime in the Rockies. If you've never been here, folks, it can be winter in the morning and summer in the afternoon.
Yes.
Or vice versa.
Yes.
It can be the other way around. And it can be back and forth from day to day. So when you say last snow, I'm thinking, yeah, right. We'll get one in June, but there'll be one in July, maybe even this year. So thank you for starting my morning with a little chuckle there. Because folks, it's been another news week. I'll tell you that. Everything from the U.S. deciding to send more weapons to Ukraine to crazy things happening on the. I don't know about the rest of you, but I pay enough attention to the political pundits and the politicians and what they say and what they're doing to make sure that I keep a good sense of humor about all of that. But perhaps the biggest story of the week. So we changed our clocks here in North America last Sunday morning. Europe and such, you guys have another week or so. It'll be next Sunday, not this coming, the Sunday after. And we change our clocks. Everybody does the biannual complaint about this and that and the other thing and yada yada. And lo and behold, the U.S. Senate passes a resolution 2 days later, or passes a bill actually 2 days later to keep America on daylight savings time permanently, which of course made half the country go yeah, and the other half the country go boo. And some scientists will tell us that we ought to stay on standard time, not daylight savings time, but stay on standard time. I love this, Z, because in New Thought we teach from the very beginning time has no meaning, which in many cases is the absolute hardest principle to come to grips with in this philosophy. What do you say? Should we stay on savings time, or do we keep screwing ourselves up and moving back and forth twice a year?
Well, I think we should pick one. I don't really have a preference because it's all relative. We complain about daylight saving, then once it starts, we're like, oh wow, I like it, and then when it goes back, so I hate it, and then vice versa. But I think body-wise, let's get one and stick with it because there are the syncretic rhythms in our body,
right,
that adjust to and are in line with the cycles of nature, right? So we know we affect the body when we start moving around these times, and because it is relative, it's only a concept in the mind for a good reason. I mean, we've all had the thing where 5 minutes looked like it was an hour and an hour looked like it was 10 minutes. So stick with it and let's move on.
Okay. Now that is in my opinion, that is a true religious scientist, New Thought perspective. I should pick one and get on with it.
Yeah.
Because if it doesn't work, all right, we'll fix it later. Right? We'll go back. We can always go back and just change back again. And but I did find it interesting. It takes an act of Congress to make this happen. And we've got the Senate on board. let's see what happens when it goes to the House of Representatives, and see what happens there.
And see if the president signs it. President still got to sign it. We have to go through all of that.
Yes. And I do want to shout out, right? We're not the only country or the only region on the planet that does this. Russia has 11 time zones, I believe it is, from east to west, and I'm sure, while I don't know their system specifically, I'm sure it happens. We know that our friends across Europe change on the 27th, so we've got, so there's always that disparity, and if you have friends and colleagues and do any communications with the other side of the planet, it's always interesting for these in between times. But I'm with you. I wish we would just pick one and stick with it.
Stay with it.
We'll adjust. Humans, we adapt, right? I think that's part of what makes us so unique is we adapt.
Right. And I mean, and that's news in itself when we look at how humanity, I mean, just in a brief, you look at all of the stuff going on this week, right? Between weather and flooding and snow and to war, the ability of the human being to adjust and thrive, not just survive, but thrive, is within our capability, and we just have to ignite it, right? And God knows we want to ignite something over there in the Ukraine to get that madness over with. 3 million plus people now displaced. So again, because here we know everything is connected. Now, the other host countries are accepting these 3 million people, but that's putting a strain on their system, right? Which is inevitably going to put a strain on another system, And so now there are going to be consequences of that strain, right? And so, I got an idea. Let's pick a system of humanitarian rightness, whatever that looks like, and quit all this foolishness. That'll help us a lot.
Yes. From your mouth to Putin's ears. Absolutely, right? Here's what's striking me, right, folks, is no matter where we live in this country, this experience that's happening in Ukraine is an absolute outpicturing not only of collective human consciousness, but it's providing us with the mirror to look at things and say, okay, how do we want to move forward, and what kind of planet do we want to live on? As we understand it, our president right now, or at least it's been reported, is most likely on a phone call with the leader of China at this point, and we don't know exactly what's being said there. We got a pretty good idea, and we got a pretty good idea that China's being given the choice of whether it wants to build towards something like a world that works for all. And we get it. They got their own stuff. They got to get their own house in order, and they probably have their own desires for expansion. But when we can get rid of some of these humanistic ideas like borders and patriotism, and I know that's going to raise some ire. Don't write emails. If then we can come into being this global family. So we see the effects of it in gas prices, in other commodities, in I can't get my favorite cinnamon rolls anymore, that's for sure, not at the supermarket. So all these things we feel the effect, but that also means that we have the ability to be the cause of what's coming next. So if you go out on the street corner and you shout out around how the Russians deserve this, that's not helping. That's contributing to the upset. If we take this out on the people that happen to live in our country, that happen to be of Russian descent right now, that's just adding to the problem. The ripple I feel is we all have to open our doors, and that begins with the heart, to these refugees. Because they're going to end up in our communities, in your communities, and they're going to end up all over the planet. when a wholesale group of people is displaced like this, let's be honest, there's nothing there for them to go back to at this point. In many of these places, the shelling and the bombing is so incredibly relentless and bordering on war crime that there's going to be nothing to go back for. They are going to seek out a better life. They are going to seek out new opportunities. Spirit is going to lead these people out into the world. And if when they end up in your community, we're good. That's when the real fun, I think, starts. Is we get to embrace, and some of the challenges will be there.
Well, and as you were saying that, I'm just thinking about, when the pandemic was in full force, we had, you said you couldn't get your cinema buzz. What made me think about it, there was this push or this need to be more crafty, to be more, I'll say frugal, but that's not the word I really want. But people were baking at home and they were doing more. So here again, as inflation goes up because of the war, prices are going up. Again, it is a time, and I think Linda put this up right here. What's the real question, right? And so again, to me, it's that whole thing of, okay, this is another indication to some degree that the divine is pushing us to be more people oriented, cooking together, doing communal shopping together. If I eat cinnamon rolls, you eat cinnamon rolls, next guy, we can buy more cinnamon rolls together and divide them than I can by myself buying them retail. We can buy them wholesale maybe, right? So this idea of cooperative humanity and cooking more, they say, oh, well, you need to get a certain amount of vegetables and fiber and let's go buy a bunch of vegetables. Let's buy some beans and some potatoes. Let's make some soup or some stews that last 3-4 days. And all these, not only is it more cost effective,
right?
It's more healthy, right? And it lasts longer, and you can, there's so many ways that we can begin to shift humanity as a result of these situations. I think we have to begin to rethink the model, right? The model is falling apart at various different places.
Right. Yep.
And these conditions are highlighting that, and we should begin to focus on them.
Yeah, exactly. You definitely struck a chord there. The cooperative humanity. Shout out to our brother Muada. Good to see you, sir. And it's that holistic global perspective, global thinking, right? So anybody that's bitching about gas prices in the United States right now, you can just sit down and shut up. Right? The Europeans will tell you that we're being babies because they've been paying $7-8 a gallon US dollar equivalent for a while now. But it also points us to that fact. Who do we make our authority?
Right.
Are the oil companies the authority? Are the politicians the authority? The people are the authority.
Yeah.
And we see this again and again. So yeah, Linda, you're right on. I think that's the question we want to ask ourselves anytime there's one of these geopolitical or geospatial events, any of these global events, is okay, slow down. Who's in charge here? And the answer has to be the divide, has to be nature. Because, folks, if you haven't figured it out, planet Earth is going to be here well after we're gone. Well after the human race is not here, there is still going to be this block of rock and ice and molten lava floating around in time and space. And so how do we get it? How do we get more people to this? The cooperative humanity, survival of the most cooperative. How do we get more people to this?
Well, I think you think back to some of the filming that took place. I forget the gentleman's name. He's a big nature guy over in London, Europe, UK there, where they showed that during the pandemic, how all these animals came into the city, and they, animals that hadn't been seen for a long time came out, which shows that when we can find a balance. Now, we don't want tigers roaming around the streets. However, there is a balance between our continued growth and taking up land of wildlife, and our need to be a little more conservative, if you will, in how much we building and paving over. That there is that balance that we need to seek and find. And so I think one way of doing that is to figure out, how do we first of all, how do we begin to respect nature more, right? We don't respect it as a I mean, you look at all the stuff we do to pollute the water, the air, knock down trees. We've gotten out of balance in terms of a respect. There's a proper balance of how much we take and how much we give back. And so the one way to do that is to, I think, let's get out in nature, go hiking, go camping, go fishing.
Right.
So you can see the beauty, the necessity of these trees giving us oxygen and taking in carbon dioxide. And I mean, all these kinds of things that allow us to be here.
Yeah. I keep getting this image of there's a little bit of British in my history, in my bloodline. So I keep getting this image of a victory garden, but let's make it a peace garden.
Yeah.
Right. And let's not make it flowers, but let's make it vegetables.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to planting.
Yeah, it's almost that time. And that brings me around to the old saying, food, not bombs. All right. I do want to swing around. John reminds us that the dolphins swam into the canals in Venice. Exactly. We saw a resurgence of a few different species that were endangered and almost extinct, making a comeback. But I agree. Now, I agree and I don't agree. We really don't want tigers roaming the streets. Although here in Colorado, there's a whole bunch of mountain lions that have been wandering around the city of Boulder this last couple of years, and it reminded me that we're still playing this human supremacy game.
Yeah,
that we still like to believe we're the smartest and we're the and it's all just because of the opposable thumbs, but the dolphins got it going on, the whales got it going on. What would happen if the tigers did just say, hey folks, you're safe, you're fine, the only reason we bite and come after you is because you're idiots and poke us with sticks and shit, but also we can all live in peace. And if the tiger population would just make a declaration that we can live in peace, I think the planet would. So but our buddy Muad is saying it again, never waste a good crisis. Humanity has a tendency to bond over a common good just as well as a common bad. Exactly. The war in Ukraine has united the country more than any president ever has, in my opinion. Thank you for that, Reverend Muada. And so we can rally behind no more war. We can rally behind various things. I like what you're saying, Z, right? It's number one, what is going to bring us back to a perspective and an understanding of the nature of life? And if I have to articulate that nature, the nature of life is to grow, is to expand, is to evolve, is to learn, is to, right on up the spiral. That doesn't stand for crazy, folks. This does.
Well, and that's it. I think we have to. And I'm going to say this first and foremost. I'm a news junkie, so to speak.
Yep.
Well, or let me change that. I'm an information junkie, right? I love information because for me, it helps me. I'm a big picture kind of guy, and I drill down, but I need to see the whole thing because it just gives me perspective and more energy to move. But at some point, how much information do you need? And so I think we have to begin to stop watching all the news, trying to get the latest information. You can, I'm guaranteeing you, unless it's real breaking news, and if you're not watching TV, you will know about it because somebody that loves you gonna call you. The same news that they got on this morning, what they have on the 10 o'clock news tonight is not going to change, but only by a few words, right? And maybe one or two more pictures, but the storyline will be the same. So I'm saying that to say we must begin to put real communication together. Call somebody, communicate with the dirt outside, plant a garden, communicate with your neighbors, say hi, you got a little extra snow, need a little help. We have to begin and have some fun, because if we keep taking in too much information, we will be overwhelmed with trying to put a puzzle together that's very difficult when we can't even trust all the information we're getting.
Right. Yep. I like that you bring up the news because I too consider myself a little bit of a news junkie. But here's what I noticed. People get hung up on these things because they think they're missing out on the details.
Yes.
And we've gotten so good at writing the headline to fit our bias or to fit the bias of the news organization that we're forced to continue to search out for confirmation on our own. It used to be that you didn't report the news unless you had verifiable confirmation. You had a second source, you had a second something, you could verify all this. Now we just throw spaghetti at the wall,
right,
and say, "Oops, sorry, that and we'll retract that," or we act like Tucker, what's his name, and ask dumbass questions just to enrile speculation and accusation. There are some good news outlets out there now, folks. Things like Ground News and Keep Up News that are really working to eliminate those biases and say, here's the blue perspective, here's the red perspective, here's the liberal, here's the conservative, and we're going to try to give it to you here so you can read both sides of the bias.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, and here's our version that does it, where we're trying to eliminate the bias. We got to get Muad on here more often. He's got all the lines today.
I know, right? I know. and here's the thing: what we now call news is often more propaganda than anything else, right? Because a lot of the news outlets are owned by big conglomerates or wealthy individuals who put people in place so that editing and stuff goes a certain way. I used to love Walter Cronkite growing up because, he was, as you said, verifiable.
Right.
And he was trusted. So people, if Walter Cronkite said something, people believed it, right? And they could go to the bank on it. Now we have people telling the news who's trying to populate or publicize their podcast or their latest book or whatever, which is for personal gain. And so you begin to say, well, how much can I trust this news? This guy's trying to make a buck, as opposed to keeping me informed so I can make good decisions and be a good, corporate citizen or public citizen or whatever the case might be.
Yep. Jon Stewart yesterday released a 15-minute interview with Disney's former CEO, Bob Iger. And the topic was, can the news be fixed? I found it to be a fascinating interview, folks, from somebody who's been on the inside. from two men that have been behind the curtain for their entire careers, in various capacities, and in some degrees, until we take the money and the advertising out of it, I wonder if the news can be saved. No. Because you're right, it's changed from one guy, one trusted individual with a huge team of people verifying everything, down to the comma, down to the exclamation point, and sharing what they felt we needed to know for a half hour to an hour a day. Yeah. Now, I don't want to vilify 24-hour information, because if something new happens, that is exactly the work we are here to do. When missiles rained down, not in Ukraine this past week, but in Iraq, I want to know about it so we can do some prayer work around it, so we can mobilize the prayer teams and get ourselves moving into the energy of peace again. But too many people get lost in there is no new details, but I'm going to tell you there is, and just stick around for 10 minutes and I'm going to tell you that there's new details when there isn't.
No.
When the new detail is that, well, it's still peaceful in Switzerland. It's still peaceful in Scotland. It's still peaceful in Peru. It's still peaceful in New Zealand. If there's 70 plus hot spots of violence and quote war on the planet right now, then how many peace spots are there? Billions of communities are living in peace right now. Focus on what needs to change, but do the work of what needs to make that change happen.
Yeah. And one thing we can watch now I'm gonna switch gears on us here so we can smile a bit. The March Madness has started.
Yes.
For all you basketball fans rather. And those are things that we could watch, and whether you're a basketball fan or not, it gives you the opportunity to look at some excitement, to look at how people rally together, to look at how David and Goliath, if you will, I hate to put it in those terms, but the small fry beats the big fry, and we see young men and young women, because both the men's and women's final basketball tournaments are going on now. It gives us this opportunity to look at the human spirit and what happens when people work together, and what happens when, even though somebody counts you out, you can still come in and do your thing and win. Just to show how versatile, how resilient, and how guided by spirit we can be.
Yes. I knew you'd work sports in here somehow. I knew we couldn't go a whole show without it. Thank you, sir. All right, folks, we don't pretend to solve the things that are going on in the planet, because truly nothing's broken and nothing needs solved. But we do like to bring some spiritual light into these conversations, sometimes a little bit of humor, and we hope always a meaningful conversation and something you can use in your day and in your life as well. I will give a big shout out to our dear friend, Reverend Muwada Razuli, part of the network here. He helps us out on Saturday mornings with our Science of Mind and Spirit conversation series. And now that I know you're awake this early in the morning, Muwada, we'll invite you onto this program sometime soon. I just figured this would be way too early for most people on the Pacific coast, so on the Pacific time zone. Anyway, all right, Z. Let's do a quick thank you to our sponsors, and then we're going to say our final thoughts and get out of here for the week. Let these folks get into their Monday or into their Fridays. But before we do all that, folks, please help us say thank you to the people that make all this possible.
Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, for your continued support. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown Atlanta, for your monthly contribution. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, for your monthly contribution. Please help us welcome Om Center for Spiritual Living in La Mesa, California. Thank you for your monthly donation. Thank you Center for Spiritual Living Seattle for your most generous donation. And a special thanks to Hefferlin Foundation for your generous technology grant. And Suze Ajit, thank you for your very generous donation. And a super special thank you to Dr. Tracy Brown, RSCP. Thanks for being a super donor. And a big shout out to all our committed donors.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you to all of our committed donors. If you'd like to get your name or your organization on our thank you video, by all means, please head on over to the website, click the monthly on your donation, make it a recurring donation, and we'll get you in our committed giving program. All right, Z. Before we get out of here today, I do want to remind everybody we got a great set of programming here for you today. Sekou Wrights, our dear friend from Nashville and New York, and starts his program in just about 10 minutes. That is Be Your Own Hero. We've got morning prayers at 8:15, a morning sip with Rev Melissa at 8:30, and later today, 5 o'clock, we've got the good news, a half hour of good news stories to kick off your weekend. And our dear friend Pastor Michael Mangus will be with us at 6 for the Friday fireside chat. A deeper dive into some of the stories that are happening here in the world this week. So please join us for all that. Like what you're seeing, share what you're seeing, let your friends know what you're seeing, and invite them to join us here as well. We'll be back on this program next Friday, 7 a.m. Mountain Time. Until then, Z, let's how about some final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think a final thought today would be go out, find a friend, figure out what you can do together. Figure out even if it's just take a walk in the park, go get the lunch, something you can do with someone else to foster this idea of community.
Yes. And I'm going to double down on that. Do that with somebody you do know, and then do that with somebody maybe you don't know, or you don't know very well, or that is that maybe you believe they have different views than you do. I think you'll find that we all have a lot more in common than we do thinking differently.
Yeah.
All right, folks, we're out of here for now. Thanks for being with us. We'll be back again next week. Until then, peace and richest blessings.
Peace.